Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Kathleen Sewell, and I am the Director of Marketing at WellRite. WellRite is the leading provider of comprehensive corporate wellness programs. We help organizations develop healthy habits, leading to a better culture and better business. WellRite's software platform now has over 400 challenges, focusing on nutrition, fitness, financial well-being, mental health, as well as a series of manager-led challenges empowering leaders and employees on their journey to well-being. Today's presentation is COVID-19 and Employee Financial Well-Being, presented by Jim Purcell and Stephen Van Yoder. Before we get started, I first wanted to go over a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on listen-only mode, and if you have questions during the broadcast, please type them into the question box. Today's presentation qualifies for 1 SHRM and 1 HRCI recertification credit, and we'll share the activity ID numbers at the end. So with that, I wanted to first introduce our presenters, Jim and Steve. Jim is the former CEO of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Rhode Island and co-founded the Returns On Wellbeing Institute. He has appeared on CNBC and writes for Forbes.com, the Harvard Business Review, and Chief Executive Magazine. Steve is also a co-founder of the Returns On Wellbeing Institute and author of Get Slightly Famous, Become a Celebrity in Your Field and Attract More Business with Less Effort. So with that, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Jim and Steve.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with an anecdote that we believe perfectly encapsulates the subject of today's conversation about employee well-being. This is not the real picture, but this is very representative of a woman we're going to talk about, a very real person named Julie. She's a single mother in her early 50s. She works for a prominent healthcare organization in the Midwest. Many of you have probably heard of this organization, lauded for its employee well-being programs. She's a single mom with 3 children. She's also overweight, has poor health, and suffers from anxiety and depression. She put herself through college at great debt to get her job as a technician at this employer. And she's barely making ends meet, even though she makes the state's median wage. Her health insurance costs constitute about 20% right off the top of her paycheck, and her student loan debt is about another 10%. After she pays for her bills, her rent, her car, you name it, she's basically down to practically nothing. She cannot save for retirement or emergencies, and her life has been, for as long as she can remember it, a cause of unending stress financially. This is certainly contributing to her stress and depression, for which she takes medication. She would like to go and see a therapist, but she's afraid of being stigmatized at work, and the out-of-pocket cost to her will be about $5,000 per year. She is allowed to, I believe, get about 10 sessions per year with a therapist. After that, she's on her own. And that was all before COVID-19. So now Julie has even more financial challenges. She has 3 children, 1 special needs, 2 sons. 1 is a young adult who's unemployed at home. She's paying for all 3 of her children to help them. She's covering all the costs and upkeep of her home. The costs have gone up substantially now that everyone is home, utility bills, food, you name it. And her essential worker status at her job means that her pressures on her are even higher than ever before. So she went into this stressed out. She's even more stressed out. And she's considered not just an essential worker for COVID-19, but an essential worker because her supervisors love her. She's with the company now for 5 years. She has as good a future as anybody could have, but she's still struggling financially. And Jim and I interviewed several of her coworkers last year, and most of them are in the same boat. They love what they do as far as helping people, but their job is grinding them down. They can barely make ends meet. None of them are saving. Roughly half of her department is on antidepressant medication. We bring this story up at the beginning because it really encapsulates, as I said, the state of at least half of Americans today. It can be better, worse, but low financial well-being is an epidemic that has only gotten worse with the COVID-19 crisis. These are people that are not bringing their best selves to work, and they're certainly not bringing the best performance to their jobs. Jim?
And like millions of low to middle Americans of income, Julie's in survival mode. She's distracted by her challenges. She has a hard time concentrating, and Julie does not care much about her job or where she works. She'd quit in a minute if something else came along. Next slide, please. So this is a story that Steve and I have told a number of times. It's a real world story that encapsulates the widespread employee financial stress in the years leading up to COVID-19. And what's really remarkable about this story is that it's not remarkable at all. Julie represents statistically the financial struggles of millions and millions of American workers and many of your employees. In fact, if you read the Wall Street Journal, and you should, one of the first page stories yesterday was how low financial well-being is decimating millennials based on both the 2018 recession and what's happening now. What do we mean by financial well-being? Julie certainly is suffering from low financial well-being. Well, we use a definition put forth by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which defines financial well-being as the ability to afford necessities, meet family obligations, cover reasonable financial emergencies, and save for retirement. Pretty basic. But why does Julie, like 50% or more of working adults in the US, suffer from low financial well-being? Well, there have been decades of slow wage growth with perhaps a frozen earning power since the 60s, rising cost of living, particularly skyrocketing costs of education, healthcare costs, and housing, irregular work schedules, non-existing employer benefits, inadequate health insurance, and retirement plans that have been gutted. All of this is hurting lower to middle Americans, many of whom live paycheck to paycheck. And it's hurting employers in ways that we are going to discuss in today's webinar. So why should companies and HR in particular take the state of affairs seriously? Because low financial well-being contributes to physical health issues such as heart disease and diabetes. And it certainly contributes to serious mental health issues, including anxiety disorder, depression, and higher rates of substance abuse. Financial stress breeds distracted workers. And because businesses rely on engaged, focused workers to deliver their products and services, low financial well-being is an insidious drain on productivity, customer service, because employees are all too often worried about their finances. They're on the phone, emailing, and texting about their issues. So forget for the moment about healthcare coverage costs. I was the CEO of a health insurer. Don't use that as the measure of your ROI or the effectiveness of your programs, and we'll talk a little about that. Why this really matters to employers is the impact low financial well-being has on turnover, employee engagement, customer service, and yes, profit. There's a clear evidence that there's a direct causal relationship between higher financial well-being and these ROIs. Next slide, please. Study after study shows that consumers, employees, and investors, they expect companies to be socially responsible. This includes treating your employees well. Deloitte's 2018 Global Human Capital Trend, its report concludes, and I quote, providing a robust suite of well-being programs focused on physical, mental, financial, and spiritual health is becoming a corporate responsibility and a strategy to drive employee productivity, engagement, and retention. That says it pretty succinctly. PricewaterhouseCoopers report concludes that it is socially responsible to provide help to employees reeling from COVID. It will benefit the company with a more appreciative, resilient workforce, which is more engaged in their jobs. This is reputational, and that's really important. Next slide, please. Now, Steve and I truly believe that we have reached a historic moment for companies and for businesses and for you in HR. In times of crisis like this, and we have a unique crisis, it's not just about COVID, you know that. There are two directions human nature can take us. One is fear, helplessness, and victimization, and the other is self-actualization and true engagement. On the latter, if leaders like you have a clear way forward, your workers, human beings, can be amazingly resilient. Next slide, please. I'd like to do polling question number 1 right now, please.
Sure thing. So we're gonna launch our first polling question. It's actually a series of 2. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull up the first one here and launch the poll. So does your company have any financial well-being programs for employees? Yes, no, or I don't know. And we'll let everyone give it just a quick minute here and let everyone respond. So we're polling the audience to determine if your company currently has any financial well-being programs. Okay, looks like the votes are coming in. We're at about 50%. I'll give it just about 15 more seconds here. Okay, looks like most of the audience has voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and I'll share the results. Okay, so we've got about 62% of the audience said yes, 32% said no, and 6% said I don't know. Jim, do you want me to launch the second one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'll hide these results. And if you answered yes to that previous question, if yes, what are they? And here you're allowed, you can select one or more of the following: emergency loan program / payroll advance, debt consolidation or student loan assistance, subsidized programs such as daycare, elder care, etc., employee discount purchasing programs, and financial education or planning. So go ahead and check off which programs your company currently has. So we'll give it another minute here and let everyone get their votes in. Okay, we're at about half the audience. So again, if you answered yes to the previous question, please select which financial well-being programs your company currently offers. Okay, looks like we have a majority of our answers, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Okay, wow, looks like a majority has financial education or planning, followed by employee discount purchasing programs. And then it's about a 3-way tie between emergency loan programs, payroll advance, debt consolidation or student loan assistance, as well as the subsidized programming. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these results, and Jim, I will hand it back over to you.
Okay, very good. That's very instructive. It does appear as if our audience is well on the road toward understanding the benefit of financial well-being programs. In terms of HR leading the recovery, HR is singularly qualified to take charge because why? Because this is about people. I know that you in HR probably entered your field because you care about people. You understand intuitively that nurturing your employees is extremely important. And you may have people that you report to, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, that don't quite see it that way. They may have risen in finance, they may have risen in sales, and they tend to focus more on the numbers or other sorts of statistical things. But I think we all know that the engagement and well-being of our employees is critically important to the future of the company. We're going to talk a good deal about that. So what is important here is for you as HR leaders to develop sustainable, cost-effective ways to support your employees. You have to be the linchpin between employees, management, and the stakeholders. And more important than perhaps anything else, financial well-being is the starting point for employee resilience. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about well-being before and during COVID. Next slide. Obviously, even before COVID, employee health was not optimal. And we can talk about physical, mental, emotional, and financial health, whole person well-being. We're talking today here about financial well-being, but we know that financial well-being is an incredibly important subpart of mental and emotional well-being. The Returns on Wellbeing has a comprehensive data sheet showing data on costs of low well-being and returns on high well-being, including financial well-being. The mental health of employees is key, and financial well-being is the top cause of stress and depression in the United States today. Now, this is even before COVID. You can imagine what it is now. When employees are struggling to provide for their families, nothing much else matters. Employees with low financial well-being underperform, they're distracted and they job hop, their customer service is too often subpar, and your reputation as a socially responsible company is tarnished. Next slide.
So I'd like to add to what Jim said and actually refer back to the results of the survey that you all just did. So this report you're looking at here, I disproportionately study the research on financial well-being, or in this case, low financial well-being, for the Returns on Wellbeing Institute. And this study is 5 years old. This is a 2015 study by the American Psychological Association. And if you look at the state of American financial well-being and its direct correlation with high stress levels, dangerously high in many cases, you can see where we were 5 years ago. And it's not that much of a stretch to understand that it's only getting worse and has gotten worse. 3/4 of Americans were stressed about money most of the time. And you can see where this can affect health, where 20% of Americans thought about or actually skipped needed doctor's visits because of money. One thing we have to keep in mind, and it's great that employers, and many of them do, offer financial education, budgeting, training, things like that. But for half the workforce, for the people like Julie in the introduction, the problem is just not how they spend their money. There just isn't enough of it, no matter how you slice and dice it. And the less you make, she's fortunate to be, what should be comfortable or near comfortable middle class territory, as many employees are. But everything is going up. The costs of everything are going up, and benefits are getting cut. So you can see a very small margin of comfort for savings for 401k plans goes away. So you're going to be seeing, in what we talk about and some of the suggestions we make, this is disproportionately about putting new money in employees' pockets, new value, or keeping more money in their pockets that they already have. These are just some of the statistics that, again, pre-COVID, 7 in 10 saying finance is a top stressor. You're going to see, even though this presentation is about financial well-being, mental health is an integral part of that. And that's actually where most of the costs to healthcare and performance at work come to bear. Many of you may have seen this study that made a lot of headlines about 2 years ago. That number is going up. Whatever emergency savings people have, I've seen they're depleting that quite rapidly, if not entirely already. So this is a dangerous, precarious place we find ourselves, and that employees find themselves today. Jim.
All right, imagine this. I know many of you have seen the Gallup surveys coming out, but the point is that 2/3 of US workers are not engaged in their jobs. That means before COVID, when you actually could walk around your employees, 2 out of 3 were not operating anywhere near optimally. and the impact on profits, customer service, and the like is enormous. That's why I said earlier on, forget about healthcare coverage costs for the moment. These particular ROIs, engagement, turnover, customer service, they're where the money is, they're strategic, and this is important. So this is a huge item, and we have a lot of work to do to bring this number incredibly lower. And very engaged companies with high well-being, their number of workers that are not engaged are down in the 30%. That's a huge margin. Next slide. And all of that was before the crisis, as was the 66% number. That was before COVID. Next slide. Less than half of US adults feel that they're thriving, according to an April 2020 article by Dan Withers and Jim Harder of Gallup. This is the lowest level since the Great Recession in December of 2008. So there is significant daily stress and worry at unprecedented levels during COVID. Stress is up 14%. Worry is up 21%. And those experiencing significant daily enjoyment plunged 20%. 53 million more adults are suffering from significant worry. This is affecting mental health. The percentage of adults experiencing significant stress and worry on a daily basis, 60% say they're stressed and 59% are worried. The predominant worry, financial well-being. How do we survive financially? How do we provide for ourselves and our families? Next slide.
So the data is just coming in, studies of how employees are doing. There were a lot of studies that started coming in March, right at the beginning, but we're now pushing a half a year into this thing. And this, I think, was about 2 months ago, this Prudential study. But you can see these numbers, and this is not just about stress, but this is about worrying about one's future. And I'm going to underscore that. There's two aspects to this, and that is long-term financial worry that feels permanent, that it will never go away. The kind of worry that Julie feels is damaging. It kills hope, it kills enthusiasm for life, for the job, engagement. And this is not territory that employers want to ignore. When you have a whole generation, and increasingly you're going to see there, millennials and Generation X in particular, these are people 30s and 40s up into their mid 50s, each experiencing this differently. Younger people have known nothing but the rug being pulled out from under them economically since the Great Recession, and Generation X has felt their living costs go up and wages remain stagnant. But either way, there's a feeling this won't get any better, and employers have both a challenge and an opportunity here to shine the light on hope and future, to help people not just get through this, feel like there's a way forward they can get excited about, because there are still dark days ahead. There was a book some of you may have heard of that just came out within the last year and a half, called Deaths of Despair and the Future of Capitalism. And it focused a lot about people in long-term economic straits, working class primarily, and the rise in suicides and the opioid addiction crisis and how it's impacting them. But there's a quote that I'd like to single out, and that is, when people's lives aren't going well, American culture is a harsh judge. If you can't find enough work, if your wages are too low, if you can't be counted on to support a family, if you don't have a promising future, then there must be something wrong with you. That is exactly what a lot of lower and middle income workers now are experiencing. They're the ones feeling the pinch. They're the ones that have not had a break for sometimes their entire lives. And this is what we're going into as employers, to work with these people, because they're all essential workers. You have to consider how we give a boost to their feeling that we're doing something for them and that there is light at the end of this tunnel. There's a generational divide that Jim mentioned, and we're finding as well. It's primarily, millennials are working 3 jobs if they still have that many opportunities to work, and they're spiking in depression numbers, and what some have called just sort of recession depression. And the mental health insights coming generationally. If you look at the rise just since COVID, with Generation Z, those under 25 or so, millennials and Generation X, you just see the spike, especially among Generation Z and millennials, but pretty significantly among Generation X. Anxiety, despair as a result of this crisis. Jim.
All right, let's speak for the moment about the bottom line impacts of low financial well-being. This will speak to the data sheet that I talked about earlier that we have put together. We have a comprehensive data sheet with the costs of low well-being and financial well-being in particular, and the returns from high well-being. Next slide, please. Low financial well-being costs employers 14% of their payroll. Employees with financial worries are over 8 times more likely to have sleepless nights, about 6 times more likely not to finish their work on time, about 5 times more likely to see their work quality decrease. People with debt are 3 times more likely to have a mental health issue, especially depression, anxiety, and psychotic disorders. Financial stress is the second most common cause of suicide after depression. Willis Towers says employees with low financial well-being are twice as likely to be in poor physical health. They report more absence and presenteeism and significantly lower levels of work engagement. PwC tells us that productivity cost impact of distraction due to financial stress is $3.3 million per year per 10,000 employees. Millennials are starting to feel hopeless. Again, and we'll talk a little bit about this more at the conclusion, we have dozens of data points such as this in our data sheet, and we'll speak about how we can make that available to you later on. Next slide, please. PwC survey. This is during COVID. Depressed employees, 48% more expensive. Health affairs. Stressed employees, 8.6% more expensive. This is in health affairs also. Alcohol abuse, 500 million lost work days a year, according to HHS. Another study, and this one kind of got my attention. The productivity loss from stress, depression, and substance abuse alone exceeds the productivity loss from all other chronic illnesses combined. Again, that's, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, musculoskeletal disorders, everything else. Financial well-being is a major driver of stress, depression, and substance abuse. All right, next slide, please.
So we're going to spend the rest of this, or most of the rest of this presentation talking about programs for well-being, and Jim's going to spend some time about how HR can lead this charge with innovative programs and get the support you need. But we spent some time talking about why this problem is what it is, the damage it's causing, how it hurts employees, hurts bottom lines, because we've seen up until COVID, while a lot of companies are aware of this, it was very hard to do much about it. And we just saw the problems getting worse and worse. And we hope within this crisis is opportunity to do something about it. So there's a recent study by MetLife that shows that employees actually expect employers to help. They don't just welcome it, they expect it, especially younger generations that do want a different social employer-employee contract to emerge. And the same study said that employers are falling short in what employees actually say they want and need. So within this expectation is something employers are going to have to do something about if they want to be competitive in the employment market. But it also is something they need to be open to revisiting to make sure they're getting it right. So Jim's going to talk a bit about this, but an assessment is really where one needs to start. We cannot fly blind here.
Okay, Kathleen, this is polling question number 3. Could you put that up, please?
Yes, absolutely. Let me
All right.
launch this next one. So our next polling question, we're going to go ahead and launch, and it is, has your company conducted an employee financial well-being assessment? Yes, no, or I don't know. And we'll give the audience some time to answer. So again, the question is, has your company conducted an employee financial well-being assessment? Yes, no, or I don't know. And we'll give it a minute. Okay, looks like most of the audience has voted, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. Okay, about 80% of our audience said no.
Okay, very good.
4% said yes. So,
all right, thank you. The point here, you got to know. And quite frankly, I realized I didn't know what the lower 40% paid population in my workforce really needed and wanted. I might have thought I had an appreciation for it, but the truth is I didn't. And probably most of the people listening to this podcast today are somewhat higher paid than the lower 40% of the workforce. And it just may be that you don't know either. Just entertain that point and find out if you have the time to do it. So you have to build your employee financial well-being program around your employee insights. Ask employees what their top financial concerns are and how you could best support them. A pulse survey or virtual focus groups can be done. Pay particular attention to the at-risk groups, the single moms, diverse employees, that sort of thing. Talk about, there are several things. We have a full employee assessment on our website. It's free for use. It's under resources. We are also developing just now an assessment solely for financial well-being, and we will talk later about how we can make that available to you as well. Now, for example, for a client of ours, in order to assess what is going on in the workplace, we did something that was broader than just financial well-being, but the point remains true here. We certainly did a survey assessment of the employees' physical, mental, emotional, financial well-being, and also about culture. We had focus groups, we interviewed executives, we did a culture survey. We had an extensive document production so that we would know what's going on in this audience. So the lesson here, the bottom line lesson is, number one, don't guess. You may well be wrong because you're not quite walking in their shoes. Just realize that. The purpose of the assessment, once you have it, of course, it informs how you proceed. It informs the strategic plan or an action plan, and you can also use it to educate your CEO or other C-suite executives of the dire straits that some of your employees are suffering and the need for a financial well-being program. Next slide, Steve. All right, step 2. Your financial well-being action plan. Sometimes I call this a strategic well-being plan. It depends on how broad you're reaching with what we're doing here. If we are proceeding just with financial well-being, it would be an action plan for financial well-being. If you were proceeding on a comprehensive whole person well-being program, the next step would be to develop a strategic long-term employee plan. Now, given our unique challenges with COVID-19, many of you will be challenged to find the funding or resources that you're going to need to fully pursue an action plan. So that is going to require you to improvise in some respect, to be innovative. While we'll visit this more later, if you simply cannot increase salaries, find ways to keep more money in your employees' pockets, because their financial well-being is comprised not only of their income, but also their expenses. So keep in mind both. The basic starting points for financial well-being are established, and they provide a roadmap. And it's important not to lose sight of the big picture. What you do now will be noticed and remembered. Remember that how you treat your employees, if you treat them well and they remember and appreciate it and realize that you cared for and about them, valued and respected them, the chances are you will retain many more of your employees. You will attract more employees. They will be more productive and engaged, and their customer service will be better. Steve, next slide.
Yeah, so this is, if any of you remember from Psych 101, Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we're finding is more and more employees are struggling with the bottom two rungs. With the idea being you can't move your way up into more abstract considerations until you've met your physiological and safety needs. So people are worried about feeding their family, paying their rent, not ending up on the street in many cases. Or if they have a job, they're worried that it's going to be taken away from them, and they're afraid. It's very imperative to remember to meet people where they are, and they are scared. And I think to underscore something Jim has been saying, it's your lower 40%, and I'm talking in pay, and which has gone up probably to 50 and possibly 60%. These are your forward customer-facing employees. They're the ones that answer the phones. They're the ones that deliver the product, make the product. In the case of Julie, they interface with patients. These people, you want them not bringing this kind of stress to work with them. It affects everything, and it has bottom line consequences.
All right. Now, while more employers have adopted financial well-being programs, and I can see that the vast majority of our listeners have as well, the real issue is lack of enough money, as Steve said earlier. The purchasing power for most Americans in the lower 40% of the pay bracket has barely budged over the last 44 years. The quote above is from Professor Zainab Tom of MIT, who wrote The Good Job Strategy. Her point, you may think you're not in a position to pay your employees more, but there are demonstrated examples of companies who pay their employees more than their competition and have eaten their competition's lunch. Why? Because their employees became more engaged, their turnover was a fifth of their competition, and they could attract and retain talent like nobody else. One of the great examples was Costco as compared to Sam's Club. Other employers of that ilk, Trader Joe's, Southwest Airlines, a number of others. But the point is, if you have workers suffering low financial well-being because they're not being paid enough, nothing else is going to matter. You start with good jobs, with good pay, good benefits, and a number of other things, and you build on your well-being. If you don't have that, no program that you implement on other well-being aspects, no matter how well intended or designed, are going to work. So learn about what a living wage is in your locale. Go to MIT living wage calculator, and also think about your health insurance deductibles, which, again, my background in health insurance, that's not the way to incent your employees to get good health care. Next slide, Steve.
All right, so we're going to try to move quickly through some of the examples that we've seen work in the world. This is not exhaustive. I have to stress, we are inventing new solutions as an industry, as a sector, the HR sector particularly. So these are places to start, and we would like to have enough time left at the end to see what's working for other people and to open up the discussion. So quickly, the places to remember, one needs to with data in hand, know whether you're focusing on short-term, and disproportionately now you are, and to avoid long-term thinking for employees that can't go there right now. We're going to talk about different programs that we think it would be starting points for boosting financial well-being in these times, and the goal being too that innovation has to be brought to bear here. It's easy to get locked into a frame of thinking when the money's flowing. When it's not flowing, that's when great things can potentially happen if we see this as the opportunity it is to try new things. I've done a lot of work in the third world and developing countries around poverty alleviation, and I've seen how innovative people can get when they don't have enough money, actual hard currency, and they leverage relationships, ideas, they make things work. And that's where I think we find ourselves here for a lot of employers. So, Jim, you're going to talk a bit about this before we get into the program.
Yes, we're going to move quickly at this point. Employee assistance program. We know that too many of these programs are poorly designed and they're not very well used. I think the average in the United States is 4%. They're terribly underused and they have tremendous potential. Most of you already have these. They may not be all that they should be, but please publicize, communicate the heck out of this. Find champions to talk about their use of the employee assistance program. This isn't just about alcoholism or drug use. This is about a number of other things that can help employees. It is certainly about helping employees with severe low financial well-being. Some examples of good EAP actions. First of all, they should focus on mental health and financial well-being. They should be able to arrange quick and effective counseling, whether it's mental health counseling or financial well-being counseling. They should have 24-hour services. They should remove the burden off you in connecting with local professionals. They should provide one-on-one counseling, and all support, of course, is done on a confidential basis. But again, millennials and Gen Zers are demanding mental health services. EAP, you probably already have one in place. Please use this and think about, when you have a little more time and some resources, ramping it up, looking at it, shopping around, and finding what else is out there, because some really terrific programs are out there. Next slide, please.
So quickly, we talked about assessing employees' needs. Well, now you need to find a way to help employees self-assess their own situation. And often that is with tools or partnerships that you can form with organizations. Jim's going to mention one quickly to help employees understand what they're making, what they're spending, how to, whether they're taking on expensive debt, how to manage money, how to meet emergencies. These are all things, ultimately employees have to do the work. Employers can provide the resources and the nudge. Jim, Neighborhood Trust Partners, I think, is worth mentioning.
Neighborhood Trust Partners located in New York City, but they operate nationwide. They do assessments, but they also have a really terrific trusted advisor program, which right now they're making free to small businesses, where they assign real live financial counselors to each worker who asks for it to assess, build a plan, help employees stick with it. And that counselor stays with that employee for the life of the program. It's not like you get whatever counselor answers the phone. It is a really terrific program. Visit neighborhoodtrust.org to see what's there.
And we have a podcast on our website. Jim interviewed the director last year. Right. Worth a listen. Okay. Credit unions make some of the best partners for companies, and actually some of the create the best banking experience for individuals. If you're not familiar, credit unions operate differently than banks. They are member owned, meaning every person who has an account with them is a member, and they funnel their profits back into benefits for their members, for their member customers, and that's lower interest rates. In the case of financial well-being, partnering with businesses in many cases to provide services to their workforce, budgeting, loan servicing, better, more competitive mortgage options. I can't say enough about credit unions. I've used one for 20-something years, and I've done a lot of research and work in this area. A good place to look for a credit union in your area is the National Credit Union Administration tool, mycreditunion.gov, and make sure you shortlist and ask questions. You want to know that they've got a good current 21st century web interface. Some credit unions are lagging a little bit.
That's really important. Yes.
Very important, we found. And make sure they're open to partnering with businesses to bring services, education, and innovative thinking. That's the other thing. When you're thinking about ideas, a credit union can brainstorm with you. You want that kind of a partner. Just quick, it's the short-term cash needs that a credit union can help you understand better and maybe put a plan in place. Jim and I, the Returns on Wellbeing Institute is a certified B Corporation. The B stands for benefit. If you don't know about that, you can Google it. There's quite a bit out there, but at their conference about a year and a half ago, we met this company, Rhino Foods. They make products for ice cream, and they're from Vermont, but they have a reputation for treating their workforce very well, and they created and presented the Income Advance Program, and they have this fully free and available to anybody on their website. But they essentially, it's a way to loan employees money through a credit union partner, and they do it in increments of $1,000 for emergency or needs, and then it's deducted back out of their paycheck. The credit union administers the whole thing. You can find out more, and I encourage you to do it at incomeadvance.org. Again, incomeadvance.org.
And quickly, try to ease the burden from working from home. You can pay for items that allow people to set up effectively, the remote cost communications, and a case study. Workday, a California-based IT firm, announced that it would provide the majority of its workers the equivalent of 2 weeks' pay to cover costs resulting from having to work from home. So that's just another example of something that you might consider. Next slide.
Employee purchasing programs. I saw that some of you, I don't know if exactly it's a program, but you seem to be offering discounts for employees. I think it's a great idea. If you think about an employee, making whatever, just enough to make ends meet, every $100, $200 you can put back in their pockets is going to matter. Credit unions can help save on fees and all kinds of other things and put monthly money back in their pocket just on easy savings. But an employee purchasing program can help on the purchases they have to make anyway. We're not going to vouch for any one company, but we have been in discussions with a group called Access Development. They are America's largest employee discount network. They have 350,000 retail business members around the country that are available to businesses that join. And essentially, upon joining, your employees get access to this network. So the good thing about them is they have a lot of local options and options for travel. I know that's not quite what we're thinking about right now, but this is worth a look. And if you can't or don't feel you should join a formal program, consider creating one of your own by looking at the employee assessments and understanding where employees' needs and spending may be going. Talk to restaurants, talk to hair salons, gyms, find out if you can help cobble together a discount program that would amount to real savings for your employees. And they have case studies on their website there. That's unable to see it. Right. Employee child care. Jim and I have talked a lot about this because this is probably one of the most profound and one of the most challenging things for employees. Then this is preceding COVID, but now we've got COVID and we've got child care centers closed. So before it was the expense, now it's the expense and the availability. The gold standard we found for employee benefits is subsidizing or helping with child care. Patagonia, you may have heard, has a long-standing child care program. I've interviewed them. They say it pays for themselves, it pays for itself. And the reason being, it basically democratizes access to child care on site at Patagonia's office. And that's how they manage to keep it affordable. And the loyalty factor in the low turnover it's helping contribute to is quite remarkable. But where we find ourselves, and we hope we leave some time quickly at the end to see if anybody has any ideas of what they're doing around some of these nagging challenges during COVID. But helping with childcare should be at the top of the list, especially for home care.
One of the things we're going to talk about in a few minutes is we are going to start a LinkedIn group for discussion with HR executives. And this is going to be one of the hot topics, to try to come up with some innovative ways to see how we can do this. COVID eventually is going to be over. There will be on-site working again, but right now, this is a tough one to crack. Next slide, Steve.
And the last program, if you will, that I would emphasize is you need to support employee entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it, freelancing, side hustle, earning extra money. This can be a winning strategy for employees. Many millennials, I've heard reports that over half have something like this going on, usually to supplement, and they enjoy it. And essentially their core job can provide the stability and the benefit base that they need. The side hustle can provide that extra income to top up a paycheck that may not support a full-time employee or all of their needs. I think more and more employers are aware this is happening, and I'm suggesting we need to celebrate it, develop policies, encourage it, and potentially even source from employees. Who knows? I think there's a lot of creativity that can be brought to the table.
Okay, the last part of our presentation. I realize we're getting close to the top of the hour. Our enthusiasm has run away with us, but I want to speak about 8 minutes on how to reach and persuade CEOs. Again, I'm going to talk about this, but I have heard this is the single most frustrating aspect of being in HR and understanding you know what you have to do, but to get what you need to get, how do you reach and persuade the CEO to do it? So I want to talk about that. I am a former CEO. I have some insights into this and some suggestions. So if you will bear with us, let me share some thoughts with you. Of course, employee well-being has never been more important. And of course, employees are under tremendous strain, financial stress, leading to severe mental health challenges. Employees are looking to HR to help. And if your company does not help during this time, it will hurt your future competitiveness and your reputation. Employees will not forget how they were treated during the pandemic. And I know you HR leaders have a heck of a lot on your plate right now. You've got remote work issues, layoffs, return to work, and the like. But despite these challenges, COVID-19 handed HR a unique opportunity to make long overdue changes and enact comprehensive employee well-being initiatives that improve employees' health and well-being. Even before COVID, most of you understood that employee well-being was central to the workplace. But if you're like most HR professionals, you knew you lacked the resources that you needed to make your well-being programs all that they could be. Why? Because you can't reach the CEO and the C-suite to get the allocation you need. So your CEO, he or she really needs to hear this message. Well-being is not just a nice thing to do, it's a bottom line business imperative now more than ever. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to provide a roadmap for turning COVID into an opportunity to emerge from the crisis intact and stronger than before. And this is one opportunity where HR just has to lead the way. So your challenge is reaching and persuading the CEO to approve well-being initiatives with adequate funding, resources, and leadership to ensure that these investments make their full potential with the CEO's personal leadership. The solution, you, or if you're not the CHRO, your CHRO has to have a seat at the table with the executive leadership team and has to become the CEO's trusted strategic advisor so that they are there, or you are there, when priorities are set and resources are allocated. That alone gives you the best shot at persuading your CEO to give you the needed funding, resources, and leadership for employee well-being. So we have a 3-step process to persuade CEOs. Given our current reality, this process focuses on the employee's most pressing challenges, financial and mental health issues. This is where you need to focus. Our process will help you gather the needed evidence that you have to support your case, prepare your talking points to convince the CEO, and to finally arm you with a compelling presentation that you can deliver to your CEO. So the first thing is prepare your case. You need to know which financial programs employees need the most. We talked about the assessment, and we talked about how we can make available to you a financial well-being assessment. Next, critically important, you must know your CEO's top 3 business objectives. If you don't, that's a problem, but okay, it's rectifiable. Find out. Look at your organization's strategic plan and don't just focus on the HR part. Find out what the bottom line business objectives are. If you don't know, ask the CEO directly. He or she probably be pleased that you're asking. Next, you must anticipate why the CEO may resist. There are common reasons. You know what they are. Lack of time, money, competing priority, or the CEO doesn't really appreciate and understand the direct causal line between improved employee well-being and bottom line business success. Trial lawyers do this kind of preparation all the time. You got to think about what the resistance is and develop your argument to counter it. Next, be ready to show the CEO the cost and return of employee well-being. They need to focus on things like reduced turnover, increased engagement, increased profit, bottom line opportunities that CEOs and boards spend every day thinking about. And again, as we said, we've assembled a comprehensive wellness data sheet that lays this stuff out so that you can pull from it to gather your case. With this data in hand, you got to build your proof points. This involves linking the research that we can give you with the following CEO-worthy ROIs: lower turnover, higher engagement, better customer service, greater profit. Don't focus on lowering your healthcare costs. That way lies madness. There are too many variables there. You can, over time, lower it. Just don't use that as your measure. Then build your case to connect those 4 ROIs to the CEO's top 3 business objectives. That's the easy part, but that is the critically important part. Step 2, get on the CEO's agenda. You need 30 minutes of the CEO's time. Position this as a strategic high priority meeting to discuss a matter with long-lasting influence on the company's future. If you're the CHRO, ask the CEO directly. If my CHRO came to me and said, Jim, I've got a really good idea that I think is going to impact our future and save us a boatload of money, would I listen? Of course I would. And if you're not the CHRO, you got to go through the CHRO, so make him or her part of the presentation. That's the politics of it. And explain why it's CEO worthy, why it must be directly to the CEO because he or she's got to lead it. The potential ROIs and stress, you know, the CEO is really going to want to hear this. Step 3, persuade. Okay, great news. You've got your meeting with the CEO. You're on the stage. First, you start. Of course, what we propose will advance your top 3 business objectives, namely A, B, and C. Get the CEO starting to nod. This is where he or she lives. Describe the current state of employee financial well-being. It ain't good, but make sure they understand it and why this is important. Then show why financial well-being is the linchpin to better mental and emotional well-being and all of the ROIs we talked about. Give the CEO the selected data. Put it in hard copy. Don't come in with PowerPoint. 2 or 3 pages, big print, big print, and let him or her take it with them afterwards. Tell the CEO this has worked in other companies. We have examples where it has, and you can find other examples because he or she's going to want to know who's done this and what have been the results. Briefly describe the programs needed, the cost, and the ROI. And then eventually you're going to have to persuade the CEO to become personally involved. You got to make it easy for them. It won't be a time drag, and it could be fun. I loved it. So if
All
you
right,
need help,
Jim, I'm just gonna jump in here. I'm sorry to interrupt, just in the interest of time. We'll let you
Mhm.
finish your final thoughts. But if we could go ahead and share the recertification slides really quickly for those
Absolutely.
in the audience that need to jump to their next meeting.
Yes.
And
Put
then I'll
that
let
up.
you finish wrapping up. And
Perfect.
then if anyone has any questions, just type them into the question box, and we'll have Jim and Steve follow up with you directly over email following this presentation. So thank you to
Perfect.
those that were able to join us today. Be on the lookout for our next webinar invite on August 20th. And Jim and Steve, we'll let you say your final thoughts, but I just wanted to
Okay,
make
I
sure that
appreciate
our
it.
audience was able to do those
Thank you,
before that.
Kathleen.
So
And thank all of you that have stayed on with us. We could probably
sure,
talk for
we'll stay
another
on for the
hour.
next
It's
few
the
minutes
best we can do. Okay. If you
So
need
Jim,
help,
yes, go ahead.
if you need help on this, the Returns on Wellbeing Institute can provide it. We coach HR leaders on how to connect with and persuade their CEOs, and a description of our HR executive coaching program is on our website under services, that is returnsonwellbeing.com. So in conclusion, we encourage everybody to go to our website, returnsonwellbeing.com, join our mailing list. We would appreciate that. In a couple days, we're going to send everyone who has signed up several things: our employee financial well-being assessment and the data document that I've talked about. And for everyone on our mailing list, we have several new developments in the coming week. We have an upcoming newsletter with an article, videos, and podcasts with Quicken Loan, Patagonia, and other well-being topics of interest. We're going to start an HR LinkedIn group that I talked about. And we are going to start talking about a national well-being study, which we hope to come out this fall, which will give information that is sorely lacking in other surveys and national studies. And with that, Steve and I would like to conclude. Thank you for sticking with us, and we're looking forward to any questions that you have. Please email us, contact us. We know we didn't leave time for you to ask the questions that you wanted, and I'm certainly willing to stay on longer if that is necessary. I think Kathleen is running that. Steve, I hand it to you to say goodbye.
Yes. Yeah, then I would encourage everybody, sign up for our mailing list by going to returnsonwellbeing.com. We'll be sending you links to the resources Jim mentioned. They'll help you implement everything we talked about here today, returnsonwellbeing.com.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you both. And again, thank you to our audience for sticking around for the few extra minutes. Again, be on the lookout for the invitation to our next webinar on Thursday, August 20th. Wellright customer from Veterans Trading Company will present customizable programming, the key to your wellness program success. And then, like Jim and Steve both said, please type any questions into the question box. I'll stay on for another minute to collect those, and they'll be in touch with you directly in the coming days to make sure that those questions get answered. So thank you both
Absolutely.
again, and hope everyone
Thank
has
you.
a wonderful rest of the week.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.